Whether or not they are aware of it, the way a person looks at the world influences the way he sees things, the way he thinks, and his day-by-day behavior. This is what I call a worldview. What has produced the inhumanities we have been exploring in the previous episodes is the fact that Western society has adopted a worldview which says that reality, including people, is made up of matter, bits and pieces, things, nothing more. This is philosophic materialism, because in this view, only matter exists. Sometimes it is called naturalism, because it says no supernatural exists. This view is often labeled humanism, because it puts humanity alone at the center of things, not the Creator God. But whatever it's called, it is the underlying worldview of our society today. In this view, the universe did not get here because it was created by a supernatural God. In this view, the universe has existed forever in some form. Its present form just happened as a result of chance events. The materialistic, naturalistic, or humanistic worldview almost always has a very condescending attitude in regard to Christianity. Humanists argue that Christianity is unscientific and that it cannot be proved, that it belongs simply to the realms of faith. The hallmark of the Enlightenment had been reason is king. Gradually, however, the problems of this enthronement of man's reason emerged. And what man was left with was relative knowledge and relative morality. This was the noose about the humanist's neck, which tightened with every passing decade and generation. What would he do? Ironically, what he did was to abandon reason. Modern irrationalism was born. When I speak of irrationalism, existentialism, or the existential methodology, what I am getting at is a quite simple idea that has been expressed in a variety of complicated ways. Both in the West and East, men and women are seen as abnormal warts in an impersonal universe. In Eastern terms, it is regarded as maya, a Sanskrit word meaning illusion. In the West, as absurd machines. In both cases, there is an attempt to relieve the tension caused by believing one is nothing. On the materialistic side, Sir Julian Huxley clarified the dilemma by acknowledging, though an atheist, that man functions better if he acts as though God exists. Another tension-relieving device is putting faith in the theory of evolution. People are given an impression of progress, up from the primeval slime and the amoeba, up through the evolutionary chain, with life developing by chance, from the simple to the complex, right up to the pinnacle, man. Evolutionary theory teaches that by chance, this amazing complexity called man has been generated out of the slime. Of course, then, they say, there is progress. In this way, people are led into imagining that really the whole thing does have some purpose. This theory of evolution places men and women highest on the scale. But in the materialistic framework, the whole thing is meaningless, and the concept of higher means nothing. This concept is an illusion. Only some form of absurd, mystical jump will allow us to accept that personality comes from impersonality. If man has been kicked up out of the impersonal by chance, then those things that make him personal, hope of purpose and significance, love, notions of morality and rationality, beauty and verbal communication, are ultimately unfulfillable and are thus meaningless. This is how ridiculous the illusion of meaning or purpose derived from chance evolution is. On the other side, within Eastern thinking, attempts to relieve the tension have been made by introducing personalized gods. But they are not really personal. Their source is the impersonal everything, of which they are simply emanations. Because it has no real alternatives, the East proposes a system of endless cycles to try to give some explanation for things which exist about us. This has sometimes been likened to the ocean. The ocean casts up waves for a time, but the waves are still a part of the ocean, and then the waves pull back into the ocean and disappear. It is interesting to see that the Western materialist does exactly the same thing. He too tries to explain the form of the universe with a theory of endless cycles. He says that impersonal energy or matter has always existed, but has gone through endless cycles taking different forms. Both the Eastern and the Western thought put forth their ideas of endless cycles because their answers are really answers to nothing. It is helpful to see that the only alternatives intellectually to the Christian position are so full of problems that they really are non-answers. You find people in the West who imagine that Christianity has nothing to say about these big issues, and they discard the Bible without considering it. When modern philosophers finally realized that they were not going to be able to find answers on the basis of their reason alone, they crossed over, in one way or another, to the remarkable position of saying, that doesn't matter. Even though there are no answers by way of the mind, we will find them without the mind. What was left was experience as experience for its own sake. Experience is the key word to understanding modern man in the West. For everyday purposes, the mind is a useful instrument, but for the things of meaning, for the answers to the big questions, it is set aside. Rather, they say, the way to deal with the big questions is upon the basis of the individual's experience. What is involved is experience as experience, and not the question of whether there is an objective base for that experience. Let us look at a few examples to see what it means to try to find hope irrationally. In the West, there is the spread of Eastern religions and techniques, such as TM, the cults, and all the rest. What has become important is not whether there is something that causes the experience, but the experience as an experience. What about modern theology in the churches? The terminology is Christian, but the ideas have gone over to the other side. Experience is that which is important, not propositions about God, life, or salvation. People are hungry for something that will give them a meaning in life, and people are afraid. Life does seem rather hopeless, even on the level of everyday life. The threat of a lower standard of living, a growing authoritarianism, world hunger, an ecological disaster, a devastating war. They are looking for any answer. What about the growth of occultism, witchcraft, astrology? People are looking for answers, answers they can experience. Wherever you look, what confronts you is irrational experience. We must be careful not to be bewildered by the surface differences among these movements. There are differences, yet all of them represent a mysticism, which is based on experience as experience for its own sake. The problem with this mysticism is, who is going to say what is right? Are we going to find guiding absolutes in the midst of this mishmash of experience? What base do we have to fight in humanity? As soon as the conscious restraints of the mind are removed, then everything can be right and everything can be wrong. In fact, there are no clear standards in Western society. And why? Because there is an inadequate base for knowledge and for morality. The truth of the matter is that anyone who rejects the Christian worldview must live in tension between his idea of reality and what reality is. The reason for this is that every individual is faced with two unchanging aspects of reality: the universe and its form, and the mannishness of man. The materialist or humanist may say that all life is relativistic and without meaning, but he lives as though it had meaning. There is difference between justice and injustice. There is a difference between cruelty and non-cruelty. There are two main alternate views to Christianity. The West has a materialistic, non-religious view. The East has a religious, immaterialistic view. That is, that matter is an illusion, and that only spirit is reality. But both are impersonal systems. That is the important point. One worldview can explain the existence of the universe and its form, and the uniqueness of people. That is the worldview given to us in the Bible. I do not look upon the Bible simply as an alternative. To me, it is objectively truth. It does give the answers. For purposes of discussion, I invite the non-Christian to consider it as an alternative, not to be blindly accepted, but for good and sufficient reasons. The Bible offers knowledge and answers the questions. It claims to be absolute truth. God did not allow man to stagger around in the dark to try to find him. God revealed himself to man. This revelation, or unveiling, to finite and sinful people is the Bible. From the Bible we learn that the Creator God at a point of history became man, and thus became the living Word. With the teaching of the Bible, the dilemma of all humanist systems is solved at a stroke. There has been communication from the infinite to the finite. God has communicated in words that man can understand. God has communicated concerning physical reality and spiritual reality, about God's nature and man's nature, about past acts in history and future events in history. While all the humanistic systems cannot give an adequate explanation of things, the Bible, as God's statement, is more than adequate. It does not need to be accepted blindly. There are good and sufficient reasons to know that it is true. The Christian does not start out from himself as autonomous, as the humanistic man tries to do. It is God who gives the answers. Man's reason does not create the answers. It only recognizes the answers. Just as with the scientist does not create the form of the universe. He only recognizes it. Of course, we will not all accept the answer. Man must choose to accept God's truth, though God's truth is clear. The individual must acknowledge that he is not autonomous, that he is not the center of all things. Those who refuse to back down from their position of autonomy cannot accept the truth, even though there are good and sufficient reasons to know that it is true. The Bible tells us that the universe exists and has form and meaning because it was created by a personal creator. Therefore, we who are personal creatures are not something strange, something out of line in an otherwise impersonal universe. We are created in the image of God, and thus we're in line with God. There is a continuity between our finite selves and the infinite creator who sustains the universe as its final source of meaning. The Bible gives an account of man's origin, man as finite, but made in God's image, that is, like God. Unlike the evolutionary concept of an impersonal beginning plus time plus chance, we see then man can have personality, dignity, and value. Man's uniqueness is guaranteed and can be understood. But the Bible also tells us that man is flawed. We are able to observe that this is true if we look within ourselves or within any human society. People are noble, but people are cruel. And they're capable of great moral height, but also great moral degradation. The Bible explains the flawedness of man without destroying his dignity or his uniqueness. Man is evil, not because he is non-man, but because he has fallen. And this fallen state is an abnormality. Man wasn't always this way. This is the significance of Genesis 3 that tells us that sometime after the original creation, man revolted against God. It is the rebellion of man that has made the world abnormal. So there is a broken line as we look back to the creation of man and woman by God. This is where there is a marked difference between Christianity and almost all other philosophies. Since they do not have the concept of the fall, they believe that everything is normal. Things are now as they always have been. By contrast, the Christian knows that things are not now as they have always been. This is of tremendous importance in the understanding of evil in the world. It is now possible to say that certain things are absolutely wrong, for they were not originally a part of human society. They flow from the fall, and as such, they can be said to be truly abnormal. This understanding gives a real moral framework for life, one that is compatible with man's aspirations and nature. There are rules for life. These are like signs along the edge of a cliff that say, danger, keep out. These are there for our good. God, who made the world and knows what is for our best good, gave us his commands. When we break these, it is not only wrong, but is not for our best good, nor for our fulfillment, as we are unique, as having been made in the image of God. This is of immense importance in relationship to the problems of which we spoke in the early episodes of this series. Knowing what is right and wrong, we have a way to have order and freedom simultaneously.
At the end of the day, there's only the gospel. The Bible only offers us hope if we accept the full message that it speaks, the full understanding of who God is, the full explanation it gives as to the creation, both the world in which we live and ourselves as made in the image of God. And I gotta be honest, in a way, all of this cosmology stuff and flat earth and all the back and forth and the drama, it's been exhausting. There have been days where I was just really starting to let bitterness get into my heart and a judgmental attitude towards certain people who for all intents and purposes have shut me out and treating me, or acting like I've done or said something completely heretical because I've been challenging teachings and challenging the agenda of commercializing this whole community, quote unquote, the conference, and trying to use the mainstream media as a vehicle for spreading truth and getting your name out there, coming up with more and more products to sell that, should be able to be given away for free, but now everything's for rent or for buy. How quickly did it come to that point? Anyways, I've been discouraged. I won't lie. But of course I really shouldn't be, because this is just par for the course. I mean, shouldn't really expect anything else but these same basic things that have been pulling against the hearts of men since the beginning. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Nothing has befallen you except that which is common to man. Something like that. There's just so much confusion. So much deception. That, yeah, how can we play patty cake with occult philosophies and any variation from the truth at all? Any distortion of who God is. I mean, who cares if you think you know what the map looks like or what the cosmos really is or the shape of the earth? Who cares if you don't know who God is? If at the end of the day you didn't meet Jesus at the foot of the cross, then it's for nothing. So you can't say that the cosmology and the exposing of scientism is all for the sake of the gospel, but then you want to tone down the gospel to preserve your exposing of scientism. It doesn't work. It's a contradiction. It's hypocrisy. One has to be supreme. And either you're unashamedly preaching the gospel, or you are compromising for worldly ideals that are not of God. But yes, Francis Schaeffer, it's pretty cool to listen to this now, in light of so much of the stuff I've been learning over the past few years. And he was already pointing out a lot of this stuff decades ago. Makes me wonder what he would think if he saw the state of the world today. I mean, he was picking up on the occultism and the mysticism and how the Western materialism and the Eastern mysticism were just two halves of the same whole. I mean, he was picking that up back in the 60s and 70s. That's what I always really appreciated about Francis Schaeffer, is he was always able to see how things would progress from certain philosophers or academics, writers, and permeate through the things in the liberal arts, but also in the pop culture, in that quasi-art form, and sort of trickle down into the society as a whole. And after several generations, you would see change in terms of ideas that would take root and come to sweep over, and then they would lead to another thing. And that really did shape my own perception of just understanding how things work from generation to generation, and through the various forms of media and influence, and how schools of thought, how a worldview is slowly and patiently formed by so many different factors and influences. And it's a very multi-layered, multi-generational, multifaceted thing. And these are the strongholds that I was talking about in a previous video. These are the vain imaginations that we are called to cast down and to destroy. And this is what we should be doing as apologists, as evangelists, as creationists, as watchmen in the last days, is taking apart every vain and false thing that sets itself up against the Most High. So if you've never heard Francis Schaeffer before and you liked it, then hopefully it turned you on to something cool, because hopefully you can go check out more of him and be edified by that. Thanks for being patient with me. I'm still kind of trying to figure out exactly what I'm doing right now. Kind of just been spending some time in prayer and reflecting on where to go from here. Later.